Now, the First Minister says his thoughts are with the family of an 11-year-old boy who lost his finger while allegedly fleeing school bullies. Raheem Bailey says her son Raheem caught his finger whilst climbing a fence trying to escape racist abuse. Both Gwent Police and the local authorities say they're investigating the claims. Speaking for the first time since the incident, Mark Drakeford rejected calls for an inquiry into racism in schools, but assured parents that more work is being done to help teachers deal with racism as and when it happens.
Anybody confronted with something that is clearly not acceptable and should not be happening, they have to be in a position that they respond to it as they see it in front of them. And that's the sort of climate that we want to create in our classrooms in Wales, where everybody is able to have that safe and supported environment, where all our young people feel confident to be there, where teachers are prepared to intervene where they need to in order to put things right when they see things going wrong.
Well, Mark Drakeford there, and I'm joined now by Abu-Bakr Madden Al-Shabazz from Race Council Cymru. Thank you very much for coming in to talk about this on Wales at 6 this evening. The First Minister there saying teachers have got to have the confidence to tackle racism in schools head on. Why do you think that's not happening at the moment, or is it in some cases?
I think it's happening to some small extent, but the reality it's much bigger and wider than we expect. If you're looking at racial or racist incidents within schools, it's a four-dimensional aspect. It's pupil to pupil, it's pupil to teachers, it's teacher to teacher and teacher to pupils. So it's much bigger and wider than we begin to realise. And I don't think most of the teachers who want to report these racial incidences is given the support as much as they should in order to stamp out its reality within the educational system and amongst the pupils and the teachers that are engaged in this practice.
And it's about stamping it out, surely, isn't it? Because the First Minister talking there about what happens if an incident takes place, but what about preventing those incidents in the first place? How do we achieve that?
Well, there needs to be mechanisms put in place. You know, one of the things I've been arguing for the last 30 years is that racism or racial incidences within educational systems need to be mandatory reporting. Because if mandatory reporting, as an example, is something which is established in the educational system, then we will see a vignette of all the issues which is taking place with individual people that are victims as a result of racism. And that's what needs to happen. And with the government making proposals or initiatives in 2030 of making Wales an anti-racist society, then the aspect of this mandatory reporting has to be part and parcel of that reality.
So no mandatory reporting, no clarity on what the real picture is in general. One thing that the government is doing, of course, is around the curriculum, and you've advised on the new Black, Asian and minority ethnic curriculum. How do you think that will help with this situation? That's
helping to some extent because the government initiative, we've got this DARPL programme, which is Diversity and Anti-Racist Professional Learning. And what we're doing, we're training teachers all around Wales. So we're not just looking at pedagogy or instruction, we're also looking at anti-racist or non-racist elements on trying to help teachers not just stamp out, but to understand the nuances of racism, because it's usually interpreted as being a physical attack, but they used to forget there's the verbal, emotional and psychological significance to the reality of racism, you know, as far as the victims are concerned.
And you mentioned earlier that we don't have the figures because there isn't that mandatory reporting. In your opinion, how commonplace do you think that racist incidents are in our schools?
It's very, very common, especially in areas where they don't have large Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups living in those areas, so it's usually put onto the back burner or is rejected or refused to be looked into any further. So it is more common than I realise. Coming from a so-called minority ethnic community within this country, I hear about racial incidences every single day in one form or another. So it is a reality, and it is something that people from the dominant culture need to realise, even if they don't see it or hear it, it is a real existence for many people who fall into those categories of being Black, Asian and minority ethnic within Welsh society. Well,
Abu-Bakr, to have your insight is really crucial. Thank you very much indeed for chatting to us today.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea.